I've loved taking different courses on this because I write thrillers and I read a lot of them. And I think Dan Brown, I took a master class with Dan Brown, I think he summarized it best. And I keep this particular rule in my head. There's three, he calls them the 3 C's. There's the contract. The promise that you're going to let your reader know something important. Why did that person die? Why is this bomb created? Whatever your plot or your premise is going to be, you're going to make a promise, and you're going to, if the reader will stick with you, you'll fulfill that promise and you'll let them know. Now, it's important that there's not just one promise in a story. You're going to see a series of promises. Well, if I can find out that information, then I can get to this next step. And so you're going to have, as soon as you fulfill one promise, you want to make sure you're creating another one, so that there's always something next that the reader needs to read a little bit more to find out that's valuable to them to keep the compelling story going. And that's the motivation oftentimes that's driving your characters, is getting to that next promise. The second thing is a clock. If I have the worst problem in the world, but I've got a lifetime to solve it, doesn't have the urgency that you want to have in a thriller. You want to have a thriller where people are always looking at, is he going to do it on time? Is she going to make it on time? Are they going to be able to bring world peace? Are they going to be able to stop the disaster? Is she going to survive? And there's always a clock to that's driving one or more of the characters forward with a sense of urgency and panic and intensity that you want to transpose to your reader. You want your reader to feel that that sense of panic. And the third thing is the crucible. That's his third C. And he defines the crucible as the litany of things that are going to go wrong, and how fast can they go wrong, and how often they can go wrong until they ultimately get resolved, until you ultimately fulfill your promise. What are the hurdles, the challenges, the roadblocks, the people, the science, the knowledge? What's going to get in the way of your protagonist from getting to being able to solve that, make it through that crucible, get through that clock, and solve that contract promise? And those have to be sort of ratcheting up all the time. You never want it to be easy for your protagonist. It has to be, getting there has to be hard. Getting there has to create lots of more little contract challenges to say, well, how's he going to get out of that room? How's he going to make it out of that dilemma? And it's always a challenge. Sometimes as an author, I find myself writing my character into a dilemma and saying, well, gee, how is he going to get out of that? Gee, the author should tell me. Oh, I'm the author. Oh, crap, I got to figure this one out. Maybe I made this dilemma a little bit too tough, but you always can come up with a way, or you change it. But that's your crucible. The other things I found that are really important for me is that you want to explore the moral gray areas. It can't just be about, is somebody going to live or die? It can't just be about, is the world going to end or not? We live in a world of moral gray areas, and that means your antagonist, he's not just born evil. Something made him that way or her that way. And you need to understand that a little bit in order to bring in a little bit of texture, context to that dilemma of why is he doing that? Why is he being that way to this protagonist? And you want to make sure that if you're bringing out, I write a lot about political corruption. It's the good guys. It's not just good guys and bad guys. It's this view and that view, and they're clashing with each other. Religion, Dan Brown talks about religious issues a lot, and you've got to explore both sides of how people are viewing these things, so that people aren't feeling like you're on a pulpit on a soapbox trying to preach something, but that you're actually exploring something that real people are, and that people will relate to that. They'll relate to their own internal conflicts with, well, gee, what's going on in the world and how do I feel about it? Your thriller needs to capture that, because you want to be able to dance around those moral gray areas where it's not a black, it's not a white, we have to kind of see it from the character's eyes to understand it. And then I think the last thing I would say for a great thriller is come up with a great premise. Do your research to come up with something that hasn't been done 100 times before. You might be amazing, unless you're one of the super talented writers that can take the thing that's been 100 times before and somehow make it feel fresh, which most aren't. you're looking for that little bit of a fresh angle to begin with. And that takes research. That takes some thought ahead of time. You're starting with that premise and then building your characters and building your plot and your themes and building your world based on that real key premise of what is it that I want the reader to walk away from when they're done with this book.